I don't know, not having that foundation. And it took over my life. Fame is a very weird thing. I mean, I enjoyed every single minute of it until I realized that the only thing in my life was fame.
They shared laughter when no one else was around and found comfort in each other when the world felt too heavy to bear. Yet behind every smile was a silence filled with heartbreak, pride, and untold regret. For years, Elton John kept quiet about the powerful bond he shared with Princess Diana, a bond so deep it nearly broke them both. And now, he's finally ready to reveal the story that changed everything the very night they met. The summer of 1981 wasn't just a royal fairy tale, it was a moment that defined British history. Prince Charles was preparing to marry Diana Spencer, the young woman the world called the People's Princess. And the entire nation was glued to every headline, every dress fitting, every photo. But for Elton, already one of the biggest music legends on the planet, that summer meant far more than just a royal wedding. It marked the beginning of a friendship that would forever leave a scar on his heart. By that time, Elton wasn't just a superstar. He was practically part of the royal inner circle. The Queen Mother adored his songs. Princess Margaret, with her wild charm, often invited him to intimate gatherings at Kensington Palace, and he'd even shared jokes with Prince Philip himself. Rumor has it, Philip once playfully teased Elton about showing off his flashy yellow Aston Martin around Windsor, leaving everyone in the room laughing. Something magical and deeply human was forming behind those palace walls. Despite all the glitz and royal charm around him, Elton John never truly felt like he belonged, not until one unforgettable night that would change everything. It was Prince Andrew's 21st birthday celebration inside Windsor Castle, a scene straight out of a dream. The ballroom sparkled under glittering chandeliers.
Success was incredible. I couldn't have done any more than I could have done and been more successful. I would have said to the guy, stay away.
Diamonds flashed from every corner, and elegance floated through the air like perfume. Elton, dressed surprisingly simple for his usual bold style, sat quietly at the piano, playing soft melodies while the elite of Britain mingled and whispered around him. But even with all his fame, Elton felt out of place, nervous, small, and unsure among all those polished lords and ladies. Then, across the room, he saw her, Diana Spencer. She wasn't yet a princess, but the moment she entered, everything shifted. The air seemed lighter, brighter. Her charm wasn't forced, it was real, effortless. She had this glow, a kind of warmth that made everyone feel like they mattered. Elton would later write that she had an incredible ability to make anyone feel completely at ease. When their eyes met, he smiled, and she returned it with pure kindness, a smile that melted every ounce of tension in the room. Within moments, they were talking like they'd known each other for years, laughing about the dull background music, and then, out of nowhere, they started pretending to dance the Charleston right there in the ballroom. It was so spontaneous, so unroyal, that even the Queen herself noticed and smiled. Elton later said that in that single night, he felt like he'd known her forever. But for Diana, that lighthearted moment carried even deeper meaning. She was just weeks away from walking into one of the most controlled and public lives imaginable, a royal world filled with strict rules, endless scrutiny, and the relentless gaze of the press. Yet with Elton, she could finally breathe. To him, she wasn't the future princess. She was real, quick-witted, funny, and full of heart. He once described her as the best dinner guest, full of gossip, but always caring deeply about people. From that night on, their friendship grew stronger. Two outsiders in very different worlds, finding comfort and understanding in each other's company. She was about to trade her freedom for fame, and he was learning what loneliness felt like at the top. They recognized each other's pain without saying a word. No judgment, just understanding. That spark of laughter on the ballroom floor became the foundation of one of the most powerful and emotional friendships of the 20th century. Throughout the 1980s and into the early 90s.
From America, because I came to America from England with my eyes wide open, because this is the place I always wanted to come to. This is where all the great music came from, the movies, everything about it.
Elton John and Princess Diana became almost inseparable. The cameras adored them. Every charity gala, royal concert, and fundraising event lit up with their smiles. But few people saw the truth behind the glamour, that their bond was built on honesty, empathy, and vulnerability. Elton often said Diana had a rare magic about her. She could make even the most powerful people feel comfortable and seen. Yet deep down, she rarely felt that same peace herself. Torn between royal duty and her own heart, she lived in a constant tug-of-war between image and emotion. And as the years passed, her marriage to Prince Charles began to grow colder, and the walls around her world began to close in. Whispers of distance and heartbreak started swirling through the tabloids, and behind palace walls, things were far from the fairy tale the public imagined. Inside Kensington Palace, Diana often felt trapped by royal expectations, smiling for cameras while quietly struggling to breathe. It was a lonely kind of pressure, one that Elton understood all too well. Behind his sequined jackets and stadium lights, he was battling his own storms: addiction, self-doubt, and the constant weight of being judged by the entire world. That shared pain forged an unbreakable, unspoken bond between them, one built on understanding, trust, and empathy. It wasn't about fame or status, it was about survival. Through the darkest times, their connection only grew stronger.
There were no mobile phones. There was no paparazzi. There was no internet. You just did what you did, and you loved doing it. So
Diana was a regular presence at Elton's charity events, especially those supporting AIDS awareness, a cause both of them cared about with their whole hearts. At a time when fear and stigma dominated public opinion, Diana dared to be different. She broke royal tradition by visiting patients, shaking their hands, and hugging them without gloves, showing the world compassion that knew no barriers. Elton would later say that moment changed everything. It shattered fear and showed just how fearless and kind she really was. Diana didn't care about gossip or what anyone thought. She cared about people truly, and she had that playful spark that matched Elton's energy perfectly. She would tease him about his outrageous outfits, calling him too extra, while he loved how she could turn even the stiffest royal event into something warm and human. Whenever the two of them showed up anywhere, whether at a royal gala or a dinner in London, the night instantly became unforgettable. One particular evening stood out: a private dinner packed with stars, laughter, and a little drama. Among the guests were Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone, and according to Elton, they both couldn't take their eyes off Diana. The tension got so thick that it almost turned into a silent standoff for her attention. Elton later joked that both men were completely enchanted by her, because truly, Diana had that rare kind of magic. She could light up a room and capture hearts without even trying. But behind that glow was pain. Her private world was far more complicated than anyone knew. There were long nights of loneliness, constant misunderstandings, and the heavy feeling of being trapped in a role she couldn't escape. Elton became her refuge. He'd visit just to talk. No cameras, no titles, no scripts, just two friends finding peace in honesty. Yet as her fame exploded, so did the pressure. The media, the manipulation, the endless palace politics, it all began closing in. Elton grew deeply worried. He knew how dangerous it could be to live in a world where trust was rare and every smile could hide an agenda. By the early 90s, their friendship had become like that of siblings, full of teasing, laughter, and occasional fights. But even the strongest bonds can start to crack when fame, exhaustion, and pride get in the way. Slowly, misunderstandings began to build up, until one day everything came crashing down over a painful dispute neither of them saw coming. By the mid-1990s, their private rift had become public gossip, and the press couldn't get enough of it. Everyone was talking about the supposed fallout between Elton John and Princess Diana. They had survived scandals before, laughed off countless rumors, and stood by each other through chaos. But this time, it seemed like their friendship had finally hit its breaking point. Then came 1996, the year that changed everything. Something so unexpected happened that it shattered their friendship and left them both in silence for months. It all started with a charity project that meant the world to Elton John, a glamorous coffee table book filled with stunning rock photography designed to raise money for an AIDS foundation close to his heart. Diana had agreed to write the foreword, a bold, heartfelt move that spoke volumes about her courage and compassion. Her name alone gave the project power, and her involvement symbolized everything she had stood for. empathy, bravery, and breaking down fear around the disease. But then, out of nowhere, everything fell apart. A formal letter suddenly arrived from Diana's office. In calm, polite language, it said she was withdrawing from the project. The reason? Royal disapproval. Palace advisors reportedly felt it wouldn't be appropriate for her to be connected to a book featuring artistic photos of male models. They wanted her image to remain spotless in the public eye. For Elton, it was crushing, not because of the project itself, but because of what it represented. To him, this wasn't about royal protocol. It was about loyalty and friendship. Years later, he would admit in an interview that he was deeply hurt and didn't hold back his feelings. He sent Diana a message full of disappointment, not angry, but clearly wounded, that someone he trusted had been forced to step back when he needed her most. Diana, caught in an impossible position, responded with what Elton later called a letter. Terse, serious, and emotionally distant. It felt final. And just like that, silence took over. For months, they didn't speak. Elton said the heartbreak wasn't just about her withdrawing. It was about how far she seemed to drift away afterward. At that time, Diana's life was spiraling into chaos. Her divorce from Prince Charles had just been finalized, and though she had gained her freedom, she had lost her royal title. Her Royal Highness. Along with it went a huge piece of her identity. The press followed her every move, flashing cameras at all hours, while the palace turned its back. She was surrounded by people with mixed intentions, some loyal, others chasing headlines or favors. Trust became almost impossible. Elton worried about her constantly, sensing that she was being pulled in too many directions, her spirit slowly wearing down under the weight of fame and manipulation. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had convinced her to step away, that palace pressure had once again dictated her choices. But deep down, another thought haunted him. Maybe Diana was simply tired of giving herself to everyone else's causes, desperate for a moment to just breathe. No matter what the real truth was, the damage had already been done. Two people who once shared everything, laughter, secrets, and even tears, had suddenly become strangers. Elton would later admit that it was one of the hardest chapters of his life. "We'd always been honest with each other," he recalled, but pride got in the way. He confessed that he could have picked up the phone but didn't. They were both too stubborn, too hurt to take the first step. And so, the silence dragged on, months passing, heavy and hollow. Elton threw himself into his music and charity work, while Diana tried to rebuild her life as an independent humanitarian, no longer bound by palace rules, yet deep down, both of them carried the quiet ache of an unfinished friendship, a bond that still lived in their hearts, but felt just out of reach. Neither of them could have imagined that fate was about to force their paths to cross again, in the middle of heartbreak. On July 15, 1997, shocking news broke across the world. The legendary designer Gianni Versace, a dear friend to both Elton and Diana, had been found gone outside his Miami home. The entire fashion and entertainment world was shaken to its core. Diana was devastated. She had worn one of Versace's iconic gowns for Harper's Bazaar back in 1991 and had adored him not just as a designer, but as a friend who understood her better than most. When she heard the news, those close to her said she turned quietly to her bodyguard and asked, "Do you think they'll do that to me?" The words were haunting, and in hindsight, they felt like a warning of the darkness waiting just around the corner. At Versace's funeral in Milan, the air was heavy with grief and disbelief. Elton sat quietly, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, tears forming behind them. Then, through the crowd, he saw her, Diana. For months, they hadn't spoken, yet there she was, walking straight toward him with that same warmth he'd missed so much. She reached out, took his hand, and said softly, "I'm so sorry. It was silly. Our falling out. Let's be friends again." Elton later said that moment moved him more than words could ever describe. In a single gesture, she erased all the tension that had built up between them. And true to her spirit, Diana lightened the heaviness with a touch of humor, whispering with a playful grin, "Actually, God, I'd love a laugh right now." That small spark of joy, even in a moment of sorrow, was so purely her. Just like that, their friendship came back to life. They promised to meet again soon, to make up for the lost time, to laugh like they used to. But tragically, that reunion would never come. Just a few weeks later, in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, the world changed forever, and Elton would soon face the most emotional performance of his life. Elton John woke up one quiet morning to the sound of his fax machine buzzing. Half asleep, he reached for the paper. The message read, "So sorry to hear about this. Awful news." Confused, he turned on the TV, and his world collapsed. Princess Diana had been lost in a car crash in Paris. She was only 36. For a moment, everything stopped. Just weeks earlier, they had laughed together at Gianni Versace's funeral, and now she was gone. Elton said it felt unreal, like waking up inside a nightmare that refused to end. The pain was impossible to describe. Soon after, the Spencer family reached out to Elton personally, asking if he would perform at her funeral. Together with his longtime collaborator Bernie Taupin, he decided to honor her in the only way he knew how, through music. They rewrote his 1973 classic, Candle in the Wind, originally written for Marilyn Monroe, and transformed it into a tribute for Diana. The new version opened with the tender words, "Goodbye, England's Rose, may you ever grow in our hearts." On September 6, 1997, Elton stood inside Westminster Abbey, trembling as he sat at the piano. The world watched. Millions tuned in from every corner of the globe as his fingers gently touched the keys. For 4 haunting minutes, his voice carried through the Abbey, breaking hearts everywhere. He later said, "The world was watching me, but it wasn't about me. It was about her." That performance became one of the most unforgettable moments in modern history. Candle in the Wind, 1997, went on to become the best-selling single of all time. Over 33 million copies sold worldwide. Yet for Elton, there was no pride in the success. It didn't feel like a triumph. It felt like a wound. "Why would anyone want to listen to it?" he once admitted. It came from pain, not celebration. To him, the song wasn't a hit. It was a scar, a reminder of a friendship that ended far too soon. Years passed, but Elton never forgot his promise to Diana, to look after her boys. True to his word, he stayed close to both princes as they grew older. And when Prince Harry began facing relentless media pressure decades later, Elton spoke out firmly, saying he felt a deep responsibility to protect Harry and his family from the same kind of intrusion that once destroyed Diana's peace. Even after all these years, the love and loyalty he carried for her remain unshaken, proof that some bonds, no matter how tested by time and tragedy, never fade. Elton often opened his doors to Diana's sons, welcoming them into his home whenever they needed an escape from the endless attention that came with royal life. Away from the flashing cameras, the headlines, and the constant noise, he offered them something simple: peace. A safe space where laughter replaced pressure and where memories of their mother could live freely. It wasn't about fame or formality. It was about love, protection, and keeping a promise that came straight from his heart. But even with all the good he's done, Elton has never been able to fully silence the guilt he feels over the brief rift he and Diana shared back in the 1990s. It was a small misunderstanding, but to him, it still feels like a shadow that follows him. "If I could go back," he once said, "I would have picked up the phone. I would have said I'm sorry. Life's too short for pride." Those words carry the kind of pain that only comes from losing someone too soon. He's admitted that he believes palace pressure had played a role in that fallout. The same kind of control and manipulation that had followed Diana for years. The decisions made behind closed doors, the careful image crafting, the constant balancing act of being loved by the public but monitored by those in power. Elton saw all of it up close, and it broke his heart. He often said she was the most human royal he'd ever met. Warm, funny, unfiltered, and completely unlike the image the world had built around her. Their bond was something extraordinary, the kind of friendship that felt almost too pure for the world they lived in. A princess and a rock star from completely different universes, yet connected by something deeper: laughter, loneliness, and the shared burden of living under a microscope. They both knew what it meant to smile for cameras while hiding pain behind closed doors. And through that understanding, they built a trust that no amount of gossip could shake. Through Elton, the public caught glimpses of the real Diana, not the carefully crafted royal figure, but the woman who cracked jokes, who could be mischievous and playful, who loved music, and who never lost her empathy, even when the world turned harsh. She laughed at his wild outfits, teased him about his oversized glasses, and made him laugh harder than most people ever could. Elton once said that when Diana entered a room, the atmosphere shifted completely, lighter, brighter, and full of life. But the beauty of their friendship wasn't just in the laughter. It was in the moments no one saw. The late-night phone calls, the quiet talks about loneliness, the shared understanding that fame could be both a gift and a curse. They comforted each other through heartbreak, through fear, and through the kind of pain most people would never understand. And when Diana left this world far too soon, Elton carried that connection forward, not just in his memories, but in his purpose. She helped him rediscover compassion when fame had nearly made him numb. Her courage inspired him to dedicate even more of his life to causes that mattered, to speak out for those who had no voice, to fight for those who were forgotten. After losing her, Elton poured his energy into his foundation, becoming one of the most vocal advocates for AIDS awareness and global humanitarian work. Every performance, every campaign, every speech carried a little bit of Diana's influence, her empathy, her warmth, her refusal to let judgment win over kindness. Even now, decades later, when Elton sits at his piano and the lights dim, there's always that quiet moment, a pause, before he begins to play. In that silence, it's almost as if he can still hear her laughter echoing somewhere nearby. The same laughter that once filled grand ballrooms and charity halls. The laughter that reminded him that underneath all the glamour, they were just two people trying to do good in a complicated world. Diana showed him, and all of us, that kindness could still shine in places built on power and image, that humanity could exist even under the harshest spotlight, and that love, in its simplest form, could move the world. Their friendship wasn't perfect. It was messy, emotional, and real, but that's exactly what made it timeless. Even now, Elton speaks of her not with sadness, but with gratitude. To him, she'll always be that bright light, the one who taught him that compassion is the greatest form of courage. And so, when he performs Candle in the Wind, it's not just a song, it's a promise, a way of keeping her memory alive in every note, every lyric, every tear-filled pause. The world may remember her as the people's princess, but Elton remembers her as his friend, his laughter, his light, his England's rose. Her spirit still lives in his heart like a flame that never fades, steady, soft, and eternal. A candle that will never go out. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.